Thank you everyone for joining. I'm delighted to be starting us off. And I thought I'll begin by a bit of a broader framing, why this work matters, why we are all here. And in doing so, I'm very much drawing on a working paper that I had the pleasure to co-author with my colleague David Document from Harvard Graduate School of Education, where we are discussing this issue of holistic perspective on understanding evidence in EdTech. And I guess the big problem that we are trying to address is really the disconnect between how much funding is going towards technologies and educational technologies, and how little we know about the added value of these technologies for children's learning. And here we are very specifically talking about foundational learning, so literacy, numeracy, key subject areas that we need to address if we want to tackle the global learning crisis. But there is a real need for evidence-based educational technologies. We do know that each piece of technology is different, and we need a common way of evaluating them to understand their value. This need is global. As Aretrika said at the beginning, we are discussing this topic today from a global perspective. Internationally, we need evidence-based evaluations that can guide procurement decisions for policymakers and for schools. And the reason we need this is that the market has some potential solutions. There are many EdTech solutions that have been designed with some research and evidence in mind. And we need to help policymakers and teachers to find these solutions and to make good decisions around what to invest in and what to use in the classrooms. And specifically today, we are talking about many frameworks and certifications that can help with this process, because they can signal quality and they can signal an independent evaluation of evidence. Now, having said that, there are many tools, many educational apps on the market, and there are also many different frameworks and different certification schemes. Indeed, when researchers looked into this, they found 74 different methods used to evaluate EdTech quality and 65 different frameworks to evaluate the evidence behind EdTech solutions. So we don't need more frameworks. We need to consolidate and harmonize the existing frameworks that are out there. I was privileged enough to lead an academic advisory board for Edu Evidence with colleagues listed here, as well as a consortium of researchers who came together back in 2023 to look at the situation of the many frameworks that exist out there in EdTech and try to consolidate them according to some principles that can guide the international evaluation of EdTech solutions. And this work resulted in 5 different reports that have been published by the University of Stavanger and are freely available, and where we look very systematically at 5 different areas that matter for evaluating EdTech holistically. And they are about ethics, equity, environment, efficacy, and effectiveness. And these 5 different aspects are the key dimensions that guide the evaluation of impact within the consolidated dimensions of 5 E's. The first one, efficacy, is essentially asking the question of, does the solution work? Effectiveness is more about, could the solution work? So, thinking about when the solution is implemented with teachers in classrooms, how could that work? Who does the solution work for is about marginalized groups, ensuring that the solutions are designed with universal design principles in mind. Ethics are very much about data processing, data usage, AI, and environment, of course, the connection between green and digital education. So the different impact dimensions listed here correspond to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and really try to, push the message that we need to think about impact, not in a narrow sense, but having these multiple dimensions in mind. So here is just another view of the 5 dimensions in more detail. For many policymakers, the question of cost and cost effectiveness is important, the contextual fit between the tool and how it's being implemented in classrooms. So those are the questions of pedagogical design that fall within the effectiveness strand. Whereas in efficacy, we are asking very much about the impact that is measured through research and controlled studies. And then ethics, equity, environment, they are touching more on the broader areas of impact. And all this is freely available. It's a public good. This framework under eduevidence.org, you can see more research behind it. But the framework also speaks to other major consolidated frameworks that have been published since, particularly the UNESCO Framework for System Transformation with Educational Technology, that is really taking the almost like a bird's eye view on what is happening when it comes to digital learning in different contexts with different priorities in terms of infrastructure, the purpose and principles that are necessary to be in place in different countries so that digital learning can be scaled. And the 5 E's fit into these different dimensions with the science-based perspective. The framework has been adopted by different countries. Just this week, there is a workshop in Brazil with the Ministry of Education, Lithuania, Ghana, the Netherlands. In fact, the Netherlands have just launched a 3E framework, which is essentially an adaptation of the 5 E's according to 3 key dimensions that matter within the national context. In Netherlands, looking at how they evaluate EdTech solutions for national procurement. And the edu evidence that was mentioned in the intro slide, which stands for the International Certification of Evidence of Impact in Education, or edu evidence for short, they use the 5 E's framework to certify EdTech solutions globally. And the way it's been designed is that it combines different certifications out there under one umbrella certification of certifications, so that organizations, solutions, companies that have already been verified and certified don't need to be running the same studies again, but can be recertified based on the consolidated benchmark. And here you see a number of different examples of different standards, certifications, and providers of certifications that exist out there. This is just a snippet. There are quite a few. And as you can see today, we are focusing very much on the effectiveness strand, and we'll be talking about EdTech Tuna as an example of that. The edu evidence is collaborating closely with other indices or other national catalogs that recommend EdTech solutions for procurement teams and for schools. Here is an example from the ISTE index that is very much used in USA, and where essentially the research-based data from edu evidence is fed into the key recommendations around what is an evidence-based solution. Another example is the Learning Cabinet by UNICEF, where again you see the mention of evidence of impact as a very important criterion for ensuring that policymakers make good decisions when they are thinking about which tool to invest in. And again, this speaks to the efficacy and effectiveness within the 5 E's framework. If you're interested in more of these validated and recommended solutions, some of them are freely available also under certifications.eduevidence.org, which is this international catalog that is collating the different tools that have been certified over time and that different countries are adopting based on what they are looking for in terms of these different dimensions and different tools that speak specifically to their national context. And lastly, just to say that when we talk about learning outcomes and sort of coming back to the initial question, what is the problem we are trying to solve here? It's very much the question of, do these tools positively impact children's learning and how can they be implemented so that there is a positive impact. So the way to look at it from the research perspective is not only to have the yes and no answer, but also to look at the weight of evidence, the rigor of the conclusion we can draw, the confidence we can have in the conclusion based on the research that was conducted. And that kind of confidence can be derived from different types of studies. And as you can see, here are some examples in terms of, was the study a review of an existing product, or was the study actually conducted in the field, in classrooms? Have the tools been tested? And if so, for how long, which procedures were followed? And based on that, EduEvidence has these different badges which correspond to the different levels of rigor within the 5Es framework. And today we are talking about EdTech Tuna in terms of looking at the specific reviews that can be conducted with EdTech tools. So I'll stop here and pass over to Subaru, who will take us through the details of EdTech Tuna, and then I'll rejoin again with our panelists. So thank you for now.